From IGN's offices in San Francisco, welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat for the week of October 9th, 2014. I am your host, Jose Otero, and you are listening to IGN's All Nintendo podcast. Per Schneider is joining me once again.
Guten Tag, Jose.
Well, very nice greeting, because we actually have a very special guest this week.
Guten Tag, Jose.
Thank you. This is Julian.
There's two.
Two Germans. I'm trapped. Julian Eggebrecht is here of Touch Factor presently. Folks may remember him from Factor 5, which did some amazing work on Nintendo platforms. And he's here to talk to us today about what he's doing today and sort of the stuff he did on the way here.
Great. Happy to be here, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
So, so you two know each other. You're both from the same town. You're both from Cologne.
I'm from Cologne. Yeah, you're from Cologne.
No, I'm an expat for 3 years. Cologne guy. I was born in Munich, and my parents dragged me to Hanover, which is.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, it's like that line in New Hope when Luke says it's the furthest away from the center of the universe. That's Hanover. Yeah. And I'm sure I offended the whole city by now.
It's okay. I don't think we have any listeners in Hanover. Write in if you do live there. And we'll get you out, we swear. But yeah, no, so we're, obviously we have some history from the Cologne days, but I covered the N64 back, in the early days, and Rogue Squadron was one of those games that got us really excited about the system. And then on the GameCube, Rogue Leader was, I think, one of the first GameCube games we actually saw, right?
That's very true, and you weren't supposed to see it.
Yeah, we snuck a peek at it, and we walked out all starry-eyed, and we're like, oh my god. Like,
snuck a peek, do tell.
No, it was... It was amazing. Julian showed us a demo of the game.
Not that I was supposed to.
And we were just blown away because the graphics by far were, surpassed what we'd seen on the other consoles. So, silly us, we thought every game on GameCube was going to look as good. There were some impressive games, obviously, that came out on GameCube. We did a Let's Play of F-Zero GX, for example.
F-Zero was amazing. Yeah. That was really, really cool.
But, to this day, you go and look at Rogue Leader and you see the self-shadowing, just like the way how authentic it looks compared to the Star Wars movies. It was so amazing.
Yeah, and we definitely want to hit on that because there was some really special work you guys did, especially on the N64 and GameCube days. Like, it was just amazing.
Yeah.
So why don't you take us through some of the early era of Factor 5? I mean, the company was founded, the internet tells me, in 1987.
That's true to a degree. I mean, some of the core people from Factor 5 worked together, if you can call it work, during high school days in the mid-'80s already. And then later when the Commodore Amiga, which was an obscure home computer, came out, that kind of gelled everything. And everybody was in love with arcade games back then. Irem's R-Type was a huge influence, and Konami's Gradius series, of course. And so we wanted to do everybody in the group wanted to do cool action games, because the Amiga was one of these platforms where the OS was in the way of good technology and good games, and people who were trying to use the OS kind of screwed it up. So we switched off the OS, and I think we were amongst the first games which did, back then it was Europe, so 50 frames per second, then 60 frames per second. And it was clones of arcade games, but it was, I guess, pretty good clones.
So you guys were like hardcore coders then, who just wanted to kind of make games?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We were all in high school, and then basically at the end of high school, and just in this nice transition period when your parents just bear you at home still, and they don't kick you out right away. University was a little ways away, and that's how it all came about.
And already at the time, you guys had a special relationship with music in games as well. I mean, I remember the Commodore 64 days and Amiga days, right? And amazing scores from like the likes of Hubbard and everybody. And
right, yeah.
Did you already was Chris already your friend at the time?
Yes, I mean, the way the whole group got together was, again, I'm the expat. I'm not from Cologne. So the core of Factor 5 really was from Cologne. And I joined the team from the Hanover area. Because I was good friends with Rainbow Arts, which was one of the early game publishers in Germany. You might remember them still. And they basically published a lot of the early successes in Europe. They did Turrican. Exactly. Turrican was Rainbow Arts. And they kind of had that niche with the Amiga because nobody else was jumping on it. Because the UK was completely focused on the Atari ST. And that was not so successful in Germany. So Rainbow Arts was Amiga, and we said these guys everybody kind of coalesced around this company who wanted to work on the Amiga. So I met the other guys from Factor 5 because one of by now a very good friend, one of the top journalists in Germany, Heinrich Lehnhardt, for the German listeners, who was back in the day wanted to create games, had come to Rainbow Arts and immediately realized, hey, this isn't the real thing for me. I want to keep writing. So he dropped out, and they needed a new producer. I had just finished school, and they asked me, do you want to produce games for us, which is wacky. I mean, nowadays that wouldn't happen anymore. So I packed my stuff, drove down to Düsseldorf, which was near Cologne, and started to have a look at what was going on. And there I saw the earliest prototypes around Turrican on the C64. And there wasn't an Amiga version yet. And I said, so what are the Factor 5 guys doing? And because the first game, Katakis, had come out and was a mild success, especially also in terms of getting sued, because Activision had the official R-Type rights.
Oh. Right.
They immediately sued because there were certain similarities, I guess.
Coincidental. I mean, at the time
it was coincidental.
Hadn't heard of R-Type even.
Of course, yes. So Activision sued, and the funny thing is how the lawsuit got resolved was Activision had, of course, the official R-Type license, but they didn't have any coders for the Amiga. So they said, you guys cloned this thing damn well. Why don't you do the official R-Type for the Amiga as retribution? And you only and you only have 3 months for it. So those were the days.
Wow, that's a real punishment then.
Yeah, that's
right?
a real punishment. So as opposed to before, where we had to find pixels which we had to change, we actually could put these pixels back in and make them one-to-one. And that's how that came about. And R-Type was a real success. Also, it was a really nice conversion in the day. And that's when the first collaboration with Chris Hülsbeck happened, because he was the in-house musician at the time for Rainbow Arts. And Chris did the pretty famous title track on the Amiga for R-Type. And that was right around the time when I joined the whole group. And everybody was kind of burned out from the experience. And I said, well, so what are we going to do? And one of our guys, Achim, was working, he flew over here to Skywalker Ranch, and met with the folks who had done the Genesis sequence in Star Trek Wrath of Khan, which was one of the earliest computer-generated
not Sega
sequences.
Genesis, the terraforming, like it transforms the planet.
Yeah, exactly. The Genesis sequence, it's famous in special effects terms because it was really the first time, together with that Stained Glass Knight, and then, of course, Jim Cameron's Abyss stuff later with the tentacle, with the water tentacle. But the Genesis sequence in Wrath of Khan was really the first public showcase of computer graphics. And a guy named, I believe, Lauren Carpenter, very famous in the field, had done that with fractals. And fractals is a mathematical way of generating a landscape. So there you see landscape. That was 1982. So we were fascinated, Achim was and I was, with the notion of doing a next-generation sequel to Lucasfilm Games' very first Rescue on Fractalus, which was...
Love that game.
Yeah, at the time on the 8-bit Atari computer, probably the most advanced game ever done. I mean, to this day, it absolutely blows your mind if you understand the technology behind it. It's crazy. And we wanted to do a sequel, and Rainbow Arts and Lucasfilm Games were very close. So Lucasfilm invited us, and Achim spent some time there with Lauren Carpenter, actually learning about fractals and everything at Skywalker Ranch, and he reported back that it was quite nice. And then basically got going on the coding. Unfortunately, the only thing which survived out of that early landscape technology was an intro sequence for an obscure game called Master Blazer, which came out on the Amiga, which was a Ball Blazer sequel. And everything else was abandoned because we found out that actually the new generation of computers was actually, due to the higher resolution, not capable of doing enough. and that if you would want to crank what worked on the 8-bit systems to a 16-bit system, then it suddenly wouldn't look good anymore.
I see.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it, with all of the 30 FPS stuff now on PS4 and on Xbox One? Because the resolution is simply was even back then a problem. But the cool thing was there was the relationship with Lucas already. And when we got successful then with Turrican, which was the first of my babies, really, I had to get working. And we had the Fractalus project, and the other one was this arcade game where we wanted to merge essentially a bunch of our favorites, not clone one-to-one this time. But merge a few of our favorites, and an Amiga version was needed, an Atari ST version was needed, and that's how with Turrican really, which was kind of a more freewheeling, open-spirited version of kind of Metroid-y with mixed with a few other things, how the whole thing came together and how it gelled really. And that was a huge success, not in sales because everybody pirated back then.
And so when did you? Yeah, that was a huge issue back in those days, right?
Everybody in Europe knows the Turrican games and has played them. And when you ask them, so did you buy it? Well,
how does that make you feel as a game creator?
Well, I'm currently I just launched a free-to-play game, so I kind of came full circle.
Oh, very nice. Okay. So and then you guys ended up in the United States, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you did do some work on the Super Nintendo, though.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. So the way how it got really hot with Lucas was one of LucasArts, Lucasfilm Games at the time, still love the name, Lucasfilm Games producers, was a huge Turrican fan. And we basically met because we wanted to work on consoles. And so I flew over with a bunch of the other guys to CES, and we just toured publishers. And at the time, we had basically early prototypes of converting Turrican onto the platforms. It wasn't done quite yet, but we were looking for more work, of course. And we had built it on our own, the games on our own development systems, because we couldn't contact Nintendo or Sega because they weren't really, as a development organization, they weren't existent in Germany. So what we did was one of our friends was in the German Secret Service. And they, of course, had nice hardware. That's no joke, the story. So they had nice hardware tools to analyze other hardware, right? So this was at the end, or basically the Cold War just had ended, so these guys were a bit lazy. So what we did was we gave a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo to him, and whoops, development hardware popped out of there about 3 months later. And so we had built our own development kits.
That's amazing.
And so you reverse engineered everything.
We reverse engineered the systems completely, which of course really helps if you want to get the max out of them, because we knew down to the last bit how the hardware worked due to the reverse engineering.
Okay.
And I think I'm past the statute of limitations at this point. So.
They can never find you in the United States anyway.
No, Nintendo actually heard about it years later. It was very funny.
Okay. Interesting.
So, but yeah, we built our own development kits and started building the Turrican games. And then toured CES, and we met the Lucas guys, and they basically led us into their booth and said, "So what do you want to work on?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do you want to work on?" "Well, you can have Jones." Or Sam and Max, or this and that, or that, or that. I was completely floored. It was literally like that.
So this was the Lucasfilm Games, or later LucasArts, of the kind of. This was the days of the Dig, or
this was the days of
earlier even.
Tim rearing his head just at that point in time. So I think Day of the Tentacle had come out, which of course was his first masterpiece.
TIE Fighter.
Then TIE Fighter. Larry Holland and the team was doing the TIE Fighters. They were working internally on a Super FX version, which never came out, Super FX Super Nintendo version of TIE Fighter, or basically X-Wing at the time, which never happened. But that team, actually, the early gestation of that team, then later on worked on Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, yeah.
So they were working on that. What else was going on? Those were, that must have been 92. It must have been January probably CES 92.
So in the PC era, kind of like the start of the PC era of adventure games and everything.
The adventure games were going. I mean, don't forget, that was on the C64 already with Maniac Mansion in 86. So it was Ron Gilbert and these guys had been going on that for quite a while. And then Tim Schafer really, because I think he started as an intern only. Tim, if I'm wrong here, then hit me.
He's a block from here, so he can make it in time. Yeah.
He just felt it. He's running over right now.
No, but Tim had done Day of the Tentacle, which was a huge breakthrough because it had the earlier humor, but it was a quantum leap on the PC in terms of graphics. And at the same time, they wanted to they had that going, the 3D X-Wing, which was Larry Holland's group, and then they had console development. And the console development, they didn't necessarily wanted to do in-house. A little bit, but not too much. And that's where we came in. And they had Sculptured Software, who did the Super Star Wars games.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
They were out there somewhere, I think Utah or something.
That's where you find giant scorpions.
Yeah,
in the,
exactly.
In the sand.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So
that inspired them.
And we picked Jones. I mean, to come to the end of the story, what happened at that CES, I basically said, well, we would like to have that thing with Wars and Star. And they said, no, that's taken. That's the one taken. You Germans don't get your grubby hands on Star Wars, but you can have Jones. And that's how we did Indiana Jones Greatest Adventures for the SNES.
Okay.